Hi, welcome to AwkwardAquaponics. We want to provide a quick update with what we've been doing in our aquaponics system over this last week. Lately, our groups of students have been working on measuring the water parameters of the system. So far, our main focus has been on the pH and trying to keep the pH less than 7 but higher than 6.3, 6.4. But in talking to members of Reddit, like Be the Chemist, one thing that we've learned is that pH maybe isn't the most important part of the system, but water hardness is something that we actually needed to investigate further and take a look at. One thing that we noticed with our system is that our water hardness was not very hard at all. Initially from the tap, we found that it was relatively hard, but with our RO system, we were actually removing a lot of the carbonates. What we decided to do is to add hardness back into the system. What we added was calcium carbonate. One thing that was suggested was potassium carbonate, which we have on order, but just with the materials that we had on hand, we found that calcium carbonate was just something that we could add relatively quickly. And we did want to add some buffering to the system before we actually added some fish. Cycling the system really got us interested into the water chemistry and what was actually going on in the system. One thing that we learned is that through the oxidation of ammonia, we're releasing these 3 hydrogen ions. The nitrite is also oxidized kind of in the next step with a different species of bacteria, and we're also producing 2 hydrogen ions here, or hydronium ions, and this is bringing the pH of the system down. Now, initially when we were adding RO water to the system, that RO water was pretty much a blank slate. It was pH neutral, there weren't very many carbonates in it, all of it had been removed by our filters. And so we didn't really have much buffering capacity in that system. The reason why that's bad is that as these hydrogen ions are produced, it can bring the pH down in the system. So we actually do want some relative hardness to the system. We thought we wanted to remove it all. We do want carbonates in the system to give us some buffering capacity and to keep the pH relatively stable. So upon further investigation, we did confirm that our tank hardness and pH was lower than our RO system water and also our tap water. We were surprised when we investigated to actually see that the water coming out of our RO system had basically the same parameters as the water coming out of our tap. Now, this wasn't the case initially, and so what this tells us is we probably need to change out our RO system filter or give the system an actual flush to bring it back to where it was when we were initially running that RO system at the startup of our system. One thing that we found by adding calcium carbonate to the system is that we did actually add a relative hardness to the system. The last couple of weeks when we were testing the system, it was almost immeasurable, but at this point, we actually have a KH value of 1.5. So when we do get that potassium carbonate, our plan is to add it to the tank and to further buffer the system and get it into a nice range so that the system is relatively stable for adding fish in a week or 2. Buffers are important because they can act either as a source or a sink for hydrogen ions. This is a buffer that's present in our blood as well, which helps our blood resist changes to pH. As free hydrogen ions enter the system through this oxidation of ammonia and nitrite, hydrogen carbonate ions are there in order to gobble up those hydrogen ions and produce and bind them in that carbonic acid. So because we have fewer free hydrogen ions in solution, the pH remains relatively stable as opposed to a system where there's no buffering. And there could be a lot of large pH fluctuations that are actually hard on the fish and stressful for the system as a whole. So that's our current plans with our aquaponics system. If you have any recommendations or comments, we'd love to hear them below. If you haven't subscribed already, make sure you click subscribe. We want to provide a lot of updates like this in the future as we kind of get into some of the finer points of our aquaponics system.